Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Rain Race Podcast. I am joined alongside a couple new people, but not so new, Kyle Cuthbertson.
Hello.
And I also have Joe Donahue.
Hello, everyone.
You may recognize Joe from YouTube, does some stop motions. Good stuff, you should go subscribe to him. And I also have Jaron Fast, who is the son of Scott Dixon's spotter, Robbie Fast.
Hi there.
We're going to be doing some analysis today about practice week 1 at Indianapolis and previewing the upcoming qualifying weekend. By the way, a little sneak peek here. This is not going to be one of those like first Rain Race podcasts and only Rain Race podcasts you see until like the next 3 months or whatever, because we will have another one out Sunday night. I want to say Sunday night, unless I end up working, in which case Monday we will have another episode out recapping qualifying. So stay tuned for that, because this is not the lone episode that we're going to have this month for once. So it should be a lot of fun. As always, because it's live, you're able to listen to us, or you're able to communicate with us in the YouTube chat. So great interaction there. If you want to ask us some questions, that's probably your best way to do it. And we still have all of our episodes on Google Play, Apple Podcasts. Actually, I think Google Play Music is going away, but you can find us on the Google Podcasts app. That's where they should be going now. Alexa, all that stuff. iHeartRadio even. You can find us there. Spotify. Any platform, we should be there. Oh, yes. Kyle has to be giddy about the qualifying draw. We're going to talk about that. We actually have, for the first time ever doing one of these, some interactive slides that I'm going to be able to go over that you're going to see in a second here. So starting off, I want to go over the results from Fast Friday today. These are just the overall results, not accounting for no-toe or anything. It's just overall pace. And Marco Andretti, early in the day, setting a really quick lap time, 233.491 miles per hour. I'll be honest, I woke up in the morning, that was the first thing I saw was that speed, and it was kind of a double take whether or not I was still awake, because I wasn't expecting to see speeds like that after what we've seen the past couple of days. Moving further down the order, other talking points include Chevrolet, and more specifically Penske, not being quite where we expected them to be. That's going to be a big talking point about this episode. And Ed Carpenter as well, also not doing quite as well as I would have expected overall, although Connor Daly still did finish second at the end of the session. So I guess starting off with Kyle, you look at these results from today, what are your biggest takeaways? Oh, I'm sorry. I am very sorry. Hold up. Because I have just realized that during all of this, I actually did not make Kyle an audio source. Wait 1 second on that. Of course I did not make Kyle an audio source on this slide. That is painful. That is very, very painful. Un minuto. That is terrible. Can't believe I did that. See how prepared we are on this podcast? Had everything ready, except for that. Anyway, 1 sec, Kyle, and you'll be ready to go. Kyle, you are free to speak whenever you want.
Am I good?
You are good. Yep. Hopefully they can hear you. If you can't hear Kyle, let us know.
But yeah, I think if you look at the leaderboard, as we use the top 12, you'll notice only 2 Chevys in the top 12, and the highest being Connor in second. I think that's the biggest takeaway from today. And also the fact
Hopefully
that
they can hear you.
those
If you can't
speeds
hear
were
Kyle,
done
let us
early
know.
in the morning. And as we went on throughout the day, the leaderboard, you didn't really see many people coming up the charts except for Dixon at the very end. But yeah, the track temps and the Hondas really are just the 2 takeaways from today. Obviously, today is what was representative of what the weekend should look like. So, but based on the draws, it's going to be interesting the rest of the weekend.
Joe Donahue, he mentioned the weather. Obviously, we're in August for the first time in the history of the race. Do you think that that's been quite an interesting factor for this, for the month in general, I guess, affecting the overall speeds of the cars?
Yeah, I do certainly agree that being in August, obviously, August is usually hotter than May for the most part over averages. So when the track is hot, when the air is hot, it definitely puts a lot more stress and strain on the cars. The degradation of the tires is a lot quicker. Mechanical grip becomes crucial as the tires then are not operating at a proper temperature to have the fullest potential be given for the grip in the tires. And it certainly has thrown a curveball to all of the teams out on track, and we've seen it from how loose and unstable we've seen some of the drivers get. We've seen, especially even today on Fast Friday with the qualifying boost, we've seen a lot of guys backing out of the corners halfway through because they realize if they don't, they're going to hit the wall. It definitely throws a curveball at the teams and the drivers, but obviously it is something that could have happened in May, but it is making it interesting here for all these teams.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I mean, I think something interesting to remember is that, as you kind of mentioned, as the track conditions get hotter, you'd expect that the race is going to get a little bit more spread out, like we saw in 2018. That was a particularly hot race. You compare it on the flip side to races like 2013, which were more of a pack race. But then you have to consider the aero screen, which is a whole big thing that I kind of want to get into here. First, Indy 500 with the aero screen. And we've been talking a little bit over this week about how the aero screen might play a factor into how well the cars are able to draft, whether or not it's going to actually make the cars closer together. And I'm sure you, with the whole engineering side of this, would be able to explain some of the offsides that may come with that aero screen when it comes to racing, like in a big field.
Right. So the aero screen has a couple effects on the aerodynamics of the cars as they're racing with each other. Obviously, drag off of the car is crucial when you're talking about not only just racing in general, but especially racing in packs, racing in freight trains. Drag off of the cars is what's going to slow down the lead car compared to the cars behind them that are getting draft air off of that car. So the aero screen is, firstly, it's increasing the frontal surface area of the car, which there's a fun little equation that we don't have to get too far into that you can calculate drag of an object as it moves through a fluid, and it is directly influenced by the frontal surface area of an object. So this extra surface area, if you're looking straight on to the front of the car, is going to be slowing them down. You also have to consider the airflow as it moves across the entirety of the car, not only over the driver, but then even further back over the engine cover. The aero screen has a pretty significant effect on both the laminar and turbulent airflows moving over the car. The laminar just kind of being the straight movement of the air as it completely crosses the rear end of the car, and then the turbulent air, which is non-uniform movement in the air that is created by the eccentricities of the car. As it moves, it creates friction off of the surface, and then obviously air will be moved into cracks and crevices. It'll catch on more straight surfaces compared to flat surfaces, and all of this, it's adding about 20 pounds of drag to the car, which is obviously going to slow it down. But then that frontal surface area is creating a larger pocket of drafting opportunity and air behind the car to be caught up to. So if you want to compare it to, say, 2018, when we saw similar heat trends, but without the aero screen, if you remember, there were only about 2 to 3 cars at the front end of the train that would actually be able to make a move, would actually be able to pass. So hopefully this extra drag and this extra air that's being in contact with the lead car and then anybody who juts out of line, hopefully that would increase the ability of cars further back to be passing each other.
I was going to see if we could get an explain like I'm 5 on that, because you almost lost me in the middle of it. But if you wanted a technical explanation on everything that's going on, there you go, Joe. I don't think any of us would have been able to explain it better than you. So thank you for that. But moving on to Jaron, because one of the key things that we saw today was actually Scott Dixon losing quite a bit of time at the beginning of the practice session. Jaron, with you having a family member on the team, I was wondering if you would be able to give us a little bit of insight onto what exactly was going on with that Ganassi team early in the running today.
I haven't actually had the time to actually ask my dad yet today, but I do know that it was something technical or electrical issues on the car. Even I heard on the broadcast that Mike Cannon, Scott's engineer, grabbed a cigarette, walked around, kind of thought about what could be wrong, and then here we are 10 minutes later, and they're firing up the car and, fastening all the bolts and stuff. So I think it was just a little bit of an electrical bug that probably, occurred overnight or during the day. But I will get back to you on that.
Yeah, that was the funny sequence of events that happened there. Is they were talking about Dixon not being able to go out because I believe what was happening was when they put the car into gear, it would just stall. And they asked a bunch of team members what was wrong with the car, why wasn't Scott out, and literally all of them said, "I have no idea." Nobody knew what was going on. And Michael Cannon was going around pacing, smoking a cigarette, trying to think about what it could be, and it was just in a weird sequence of events for Scott.
Yeah, well, it didn't end up affecting them that much at the end of the day because Scott Dixon, I didn't actually get an idea of where he was at the end of the day, but I know it was in the Fast 9. Kyle, help me out with that if you remember. But it certainly was in the Fast 9. Moving on, though. Some other things from today. Actually, I guess overall we're talking about speed this week, and one thing to remember is that for this season, IndyCar had increased the amount of boost for qualifying that the drivers have. So they actually increased it from 20.3 pounds per square inch of boost to 21.7. And I think that added around, I heard figures around 70 horsepower, 50 to 70 more horsepower. I don't remember an exact number on that.
Well, that's hard because it is a turbocharger, but generally speaking, you're actually looking at about 1.4 times the amount of horsepower. So we're getting, not horsepower, but you're getting about 14.7 horsepower, at least by my calculations. Now, obviously, my calculations are not accounting for some of the more specific technical stuff that goes into the fact that these engines are specifically designed to be going super fast all the time. But I don't know if it's actually 70 horsepower.
Right. Well, it is certainly more than they were running last year, though. But I did find interesting, and I guess that this is an offset of that, is that the cars were running slower than they were last year, and a couple miles per hour slower than they were previous years, 2018, 2019, over on the standard practice days, without that increased boost. And then when they actually added that today, it was a few miles an hour quicker than we saw the last couple of years. I guess it's expected because obviously they were running more boost than they had the past 2 years. But just something interesting to note. I guess also I've noticed that the cars over the week, with the exception of Alonso having that little hiccup on Thursday that we're going to talk about later, it seemed to me like everybody's been running pretty drama-free in terms of cars feeling too loose. I mean, usually within the first couple of days of practice, we'll see cars getting loose, a lot of cars wrecking. This has been something that we've seen especially often in 2015. We had those huge crashes. It seems like every year, and I'm just, knock on wood because it could happen at any time now. It could happen tomorrow morning for all we know, but it's been a relatively drama-free week. It doesn't seem like the cars are really on the edge quite like to the level they are in the previous years.
Yeah, this was the first Fast Friday since, I don't remember if there was a crash in 17, but I said it last night. There's always one on Fast Friday, and I thought with the extra boost, and especially with how fast they're running, there were certainly a lot of close calls today, especially at the end of the day with everyone pushing up into the wall, getting really close. But I think the biggest key here is because of everything that's happened, I don't think there's many people who have backup cars readily available. Obviously, Fernando had his crash, but it wasn't. It was just luckily for him bolt-on pieces, and actually the car wasn't that badly damaged. It was just enough that they could get it fixed and get it going overnight pretty easily. So a lot of people don't have spares, and I mean if someone, especially a team like Dragon Speed, say if they wrecked out, then they probably wouldn't start the race. Yeah, it's just people being extra careful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's been a big talking point this week. I think that's why I was really surprised this morning when I saw cars going 233 right out of the gate, is because I didn't expect that they'd be getting anywhere close to that. I expected, honestly, my realistic expectation is that they'd probably be running around the same times they were last year on Fast Friday, even with the increasing qualifying boost. But so yeah, it was a huge surprise because I think it was in the realm of around 2 or 3 miles per hour faster than last year's Fast Friday from Marco Andretti's top time. And that leads me into the next talking point right here. Andretti Autosport, kind of out of nowhere almost. It seems like since 2018, Penske has been the star of the show at Indianapolis. But this week, Penske's kind of been, they've been quietly there. They claim that they're working on their race pace, but I know that their drivers have said that overall they don't have the pace to match the Hondas.
Joe?
Yeah, well, so if you want to talk about Honda versus Chevy, obviously you look back more towards the Aero Kit time frame, and we definitely saw a better competition between the two of them. And then especially if you want to talk about the Andretti Autosport at that time, that was in their run where they were very successful at the 500, winning a good couple times from the beginning of the DW12 era to the end of the Aero Kits. And then we move into the IR18 era. And so with the larger cars comes more drag, comes a car that needs to move through the air smoothly and needs the engine to get it to do just that. And with the addition of the aeroscreen, maybe we're coming a little closer to the sorts of push that the engine needs to give the car to move through move a larger surface area through the air. It could have an effect. It could also just be that the performance of Honda over these last 2 years has been driving them to put more into their cars and try to get a faster car out on track. A lot of people talk about Chevy having the speed these past few years, but don't forget, second and third place last year were Hondas. And I understand there are differences between running in the drafts and running out front. And it was evident last year that Pagano's car was just the car to win the race. But don't sleep on Honda quite yet. Don't sleep on Honda from last year, because they definitely showed that they could compete if they had the right drivers and the right cars up front. The engines could perform and could at least keep up with the Chevys. So it's more surprising, at least to me, to see Chevy so far down. Obviously, Connor Daly kind of proved that it's possible to go fast, but I would say that Chevy not catching up as much to the Hondas could be more surprising. And obviously, the thing that Marco Andretti had said a couple years ago about the sandbagging, that adds a gray area, and we can talk about that later with the Marco point, because it could be valid again, but it does make you think what is going on. We've had plenty of time with these engines. They're not new engines, so it's not like COVID restricted the development of the engines, and we've got a situation like with Lotus when they show up with an engine that can't perform because they don't have the resources and experience and technology to make an engine as fast. We've been using these engines, so it's kind of interesting that there's such a difference in performance. And as for Andretti is just one of the big teams. So, and with basically six cars running, it would make sense that they'd be able to beat the learning curve quicker too. So it does make sense for Andretti to kind of lead the way from the sheer numbers of people that they have working on the teams. But the Chevys did surprise me throughout this week so far.
Yeah, and actually a little tidbit on Connor Daly, who was second at the end of the day. If you look at his non-tow rank, it was actually all the way down in 27th. So I mentioned earlier that he was Ed Carpenter's best driver today, but shows you that having a huge tow will jump you in the standings just an absolute massive amount. But moving on to the next subject, I guess here, I wanted to talk about going back to the temperatures of the race. We've seen, I think, more track fall off this year than we have in previous years. And this is actually going to be something big for qualifying tomorrow as well, because you have to realize that with the qualifying draw, any driver who's really early on, who's going to be qualifying really early in the day, is probably going to have a significant advantage because of their track conditions. We saw straight out of the gate today, we had some of the fastest times, and it really wasn't until the end of the session that you saw a couple of drivers starting to maybe get a couple of times near the top 10. I think we had one driver jump inside the top 10. Trying to remember who it was. I believe it was Alex Palou jumping inside the top 10 at the very end with an improved time. Actually, Scott Dixon improved along with Will Power as well, but the majority of those quick lap times were coming earlier on in the day, and this is going to bring me on to the qualifying draw here. You can see Ray Hall Letterman pretty lucky out of the gate with with two of their cars having the first two qualifying positions, or first two cars to qualify, not first two qualifying positions. And then just running down the rest of the order, you see some of the Andretti cars, they're going to be qualifying in the middle of the day. So definitely something interesting there to keep in mind is we've talked about Andretti having a pace advantage or seemingly pace advantage throughout the week, how that's going to affect them during the day with qualifying when the track is much hotter than the session starting. I am sorry, Kyle. I am sorry. I don't even have an audio thing on this one either. Oh, brilliant. Awkward silence that is definitely not going to be cut out in post. I am sorry. This is the problem with having multiple sources, is you can't hear Kyle. Brilliant. I'm sorry about that.
So let me fill this minute here while you get Kyle set up.
It's going to be set up in 3, 2, 1. There you go. Now I should have Kyle back. Nope, it is still... Try talking, one of you.
Great job. Hello?
Okay, now we can hear you. Perfect.
All right.
I'm sorry about that.
But yeah, the qualifying order, I think the majority of the Fast 9 are going to be the guys who go out early. Because the later in the day you go, after all 33 have gone out, you're going to be looking towards the middle of the day to the end of the day when the track temp's going to be at its hottest. And I think maybe at the end of the day, some guys could be able to bump their way into the Fast 9. But I think if you qualify in the top 5 in the early morning, I think you'll probably be pretty set for the rest of the day, and we'll have to make as many multiple runs. Obviously, without bumping this year, I think we might see a little bit more of a relaxed Saturday, maybe even some downtime at some point in the day for practice session to open up. But yeah, I think you get someone like Graham, Ray Hall, actually, they're usually unlucky with their draws, and they end up later in the day like last year. But I think Graham being the first to go out, you don't really want to be the first guy to go out. And then Sato has Graham as a teammate to, see where the track's at and things like that when he goes out. I think anyone I see at the top of the order going out, I think Dixon is in the perfect spot in 6th right there. Someone like Dalton Kellett, I'm interested to see if he'll qualify further up because of the lower track temp when he goes out. But then you get someone like Marco Andretti, who's just, man, how bad does Marco's luck have to be when you go all week in the top 3 in the sheets, and then you get to the qualifying draw and you're 28th? Man, that's just the worst luck. So yeah, the draw, couldn't be more scattered, and it's really setting up for a really drama-filled qualifying day to see who will be where.
Well, let's not forget that if you can bail on qualifying if you don't think your attempt is worth running. So that person, or let's say Sage Karam goes out, doesn't feel like his car is strong enough, he could bail on that qualifying and jump back in line before, let's say, even Dixon, or not even Dixon. I think before another driver. So I don't think, if some, like, let's say Dixon gets bumped down a position and tries to jump back in line, Sage could already be there, or somebody else could. So I don't know how this shakeup will go with qualifying, but I definitely think we'll have more second lappers throughout the day. But yeah, like Kyle said, it's going to be very interesting.
That's another thing. Without bumping this year, it's unlimited attempts, correct?
So yes.
Yeah, so it's unlimited attempts, and that the line where you withdraw your time completely, are there still 2 lines?
I think so. I could read up on that. But yes, I do think that
Because if so, you're in a position here where you have, obviously track change has always been important here, but like Chris said earlier, I think this year we've seen it a ton, especially on today with the extra boost. We saw the times just happen in the morning and then just stay all day. I think it's going to be really important this year. The guys that go out early when the track's the coolest, I think those guys, I can see them doing one run and being done. If they withdraw their time, I certainly would think that they'd go slower. So
I would agree with that 100%. The heat of the day, we saw it throughout the practice sessions we've already had. And today with the qualifying boost, we've seen that as the day goes on and the track gets hot and the air gets hot, the speeds slow down. So if I was Graham Hall, Takuma, Dalton Kellett, if I was at the front end of the field, I would be very keen on getting that run in and getting it in clean, because the track's going to be cooler today when you start the day, so long as there doesn't come cloud cover or a cool breeze, which I am no weatherman, nor is anybody who's in charge of the weather reports for Indianapolis, Indiana anyway. But for me, if I'm at the front of the field, I am not at all costs, I am not waving off that run, because you're going to get so much better track surface and air temperature and track temperature to operate your car and at a proper standard and keep everything in line to have a really good run. And yeah, the guys who are at the tail end of the field that are going to be running more towards the afternoon for their first attempt here it's gonna really be hard for them. And as the day wanes on, I could see maybe when the shadows start getting long and the track starts cooling off, it could be a little bit of a race for the teams to get out on the track at the end to try to get a good session in some shade and maybe some cooler temperatures as well.
See, I just looked up the weather for tomorrow at 11 a.m. when qualifying opens up. Well, not track temp because we don't know that yet, but air temp will be at 81 degrees. And by the time the track closes at 4:50 to be exact, it'll be 86 degrees. And that's another thing. Usually it's 5:50, but now it's 4:50. They kind of took an hour out of qualifying. Obviously, there's no bumping to go on. You're really just bumping out of the Fast 9, and we don't need that extra hour. But yeah, that extra hour that's being taken out of qualifying is going to take away some of the shadows at the end of the day and the lower temp towards sunset. So that could play a role too this year. But a 5-degree change in weather is just that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. So going back to qualifying, I read up on the qualifying rules. Each person or each driver gets an attempt to make qualifying, one guaranteed attempt. But I believe from previous years, if they bail on an attempt, they get to go in front of, let's say, because Graham is going first. So if Graham, after makes a run, gets back in line, they can go in front of Graham. So they get their first guaranteed attempt. And then, so basically, I could see a bunch of musical chairs. I could see teams being satisfied with the run, and then going in the line, but pulling the car back out. But then they realize they get bumped even further, so they jump back in line. So it's going to be quite interesting. And I also want to comment on the weather. I know the Chevys really struggle in the heat. I think the Hondas are a little bit better with that. I heard that through the broadcast today that, the temp today was 130 degrees on track. I think that was in turn 3. So I definitely think the Chevys are going to be kind of struggling tomorrow. With the exception of Connor Daly, he's probably had the strongest car all week, but it's going to be interesting. I mean, for Fast Friday last year, 6 out of 6 Chevys were in the top 10, and there was only 4 Hondas there. So, and it's kind of reversed. There's only like I think 1 or 2 Chevys in the top 10 for Fast Friday's results for this year. So,
and to go along with the air temperature is also the direct sunlight, because don't forget that track is sealed up nice and new with fresh surface, so it's nice and smooth and new and very dark in color. So the dark color is definitely going to absorb the heat quicker than it may have if the track was a little bit older, and obviously it's going to create more grip, which is going to create more wear on the tires. So the ability to have a consistent run, especially in the longer parts of the day where the sun is out and beating down on the speedway really hard, it's going to be hard for them to put together a really good, consistent run.
That's another good point that I heard Marco bring up today that I think is going to really play a factor, is because of the added boost and how much faster they're going into the corners. Kyle Conley just put it in the chat that Jack Harvey went 243 into turn 3. I was looking at those track speeds, and they're absolutely flying, and we saw cars, pushing towards the wall. They're really pushing it. And I think, Marco brought up this point that, with the track the way it is this year, the consistency over a 4-lap average is going to be, it's probably going to be the hardest 16 miles we've seen in a long time. That's the big picture here, and it's going to be, that's going to really play an effect.
Something interesting I just thought about is, with the race starting a few hours later this year than it usually is supposed to, you usually see the end of the race is pretty much in the peak track temperature time frame. This year I'd expect that the track temperature is going to peak maybe 2/3 of the way into the race and then get a little bit cooler towards the end. I don't know if that's going to actually play a factor. Probably won't be anything significant, but something to keep in mind for the actual race conditions. I'm sure we'll have more of an insight onto what the weather will be for our post-qualifying episode. But sort of sidelining on the topic of the weather, we've seen drivers this week. It's been a big problem, especially on day 1, with the aero screen and actually having proper cooling inside of the car. We've seen IndyCar practicing with a couple of different tools to sort of offset the heat that they're experiencing inside of the cockpit, because obviously they don't have that direct airflow to the cockpit anymore. So we saw the snorkel that they were testing out at Iowa and Road America. I haven't seen it on any of the cars this week, so I can't imagine any teams are going to end up running it. I think it's just pretty much down to drag. Why I don't know if IndyCar is mandated that they can't run it, but I certainly haven't seen any teams on track running that snorkel. So all of the cooling for the driver has pretty much been down to that hose that we see with the inlet on the side of the aero screen, feeding cool air directly into their helmet. And that was a big problem on day 1, because we saw quite a few cars coming into the pits because simply that air duct fell out of their helmet and they weren't able to reach up and place it back in. I know I talked a little bit on Joe's little post-practice episode that he did on his channel about that being an issue, and we haven't seen it, at least NBC hasn't shown it to us quite as much over the past 2 sessions, but definitely something to think about for the race, because if that falls out during the race, I think that would just end up being a mandatory pit stop. There's no way you're going to be running with pretty much no ventilation to the driver until the end of the stop unless you're really close to it.
Yeah, we saw those falling out a lot, especially on day 1 of practice. I remember Ferrucci's was duct taped onto his helmet, which, from my experience engineering things and working on stuff, that scares me to see that they're literally just they resort to duct taping it on. And I mean, if duct taping it on works, it works, but it does concern me to see that we are still trying to fix this as we move into qualifying, and we're only a week away from getting this race underway. We're only a little over a week from actually putting these drivers in the cars for 500 miles. And you're certainly right that if they fall out during the race, that's a mandatory pit stop. I would be concerned if IndyCar didn't do something about that during the race, because the drivers are going to be competitive and they're not going to want to pit to fix something as silly as that, but they have to.
Yeah, I mean, that could be viewed as pretty much a safety component in the car, like anything else, where it's a black and orange flag. They have to come in and repair it. So we'll see. Maybe IndyCar, and I'm hoping that IndyCar will implement something on the cooling devices to prevent it from falling out as easily, because the analogy I've been making all week is that it seems like it's just a vacuum cleaner attachment where you have, I guess, the regular vacuum handle, and then you can attach something to it where it's there, but it's not really secured properly. And it hasn't seemed to have been a big problem at tracks like Road America or Iowa or even Texas. I don't think it was a huge problem. But for this, I'm assuming with the higher speeds, that's why it's ended up being a problem.
Yeah, and we talk about the drag and the turbulence that comes off of these cars, and a lot of people could look at that tube and say, well, you have to protect the front of that tube to keep it from falling off and going the same direction as the wind would be going towards the back of the car. But the turbulent air that the aeroscreen has been creating is having an influence on it from the front, from the back, from the top, even from the bottom. The tube is actually getting a lot of air movement, non-uniform, all over the place type air right now. So it's going to try to work itself off of the helmet. It's this shaking that's going on is going to try to get the tube to free itself, and then obviously then we have cooling problems for the driver. So there needs to be some sort of latch. There needs to be some sort of way to really for sure secure it, that at the same time could be easily removed if we needed to get a driver out of the car very quickly, or if something very serious happened, which we always hope doesn't happen. But the turbulence of air coming off of the aeroscreen definitely is having a huge effect on this right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you pretty much mentioned it all right there. When IndyCar does find something to improve the hose coming off of the helmet, they're going to need to make it something that the drivers can swiftly remove purposely if they need to, in the event of like a car fire or just a crash in general. I guess moving on to the next thing, we've talked quite a bit about qualifying. We've talked about practice. I want to talk about Fernando yesterday, because he's pretty much the only driver we've seen have a major slip-up this week. The only other one I've seen have... Well, we had a couple drivers today, like Elio Castroneves running close to the wall. They had some close calls. Santino Ferrucci was in the same boat. Charlie Kimball on day one got really loose into turn 2. It wasn't really loose, but loose enough for me to notice. But Fernando Alonso seems to have been the only driver who has been running into some issues this week. And, I'm going to show his crash right here. You can see exactly what went wrong for him. Pretty much just goes into the turn, and that was it right there. For me to make a joke about it, I've always said, oh, all you got to do is not hit the curb, and he hit the curb. But that's pretty much what caused that trip up right there for Fernando.
Yeah, and he got very lucky, as Kyle mentioned before. The only components he really wrecked and had to replace were components that could just be bolted on and off. They got that car back together, and he got back out on track pretty quickly after this incident, considering some of the accidents we've seen in the past with cars getting much more violent accidents in the corners, and then the teams having to completely rebuild the cars. So he got pretty lucky with getting away with this one with only minor flesh wounds. And I've personally thought that the team as a whole rebounded pretty well from this. Obviously, with a wreck, you have to pretty much start from the beginning with setups and making sure that car is secure under the driver and he's comfortable and likes his setup. But they did do a pretty darn good job of working together, both with Alonso and with the team, to put this car back out on track. And I was very impressed with the overall performance of the team to do so.
Yeah, they didn't unnecessarily send it to a paint shop. And then
that's an easy joke. The door was wide open on that one, but
and they actually had a steering wheel, and when they put the setup back on it, they converted it, to inches. They converted it to metric. Yeah.
Well, when Chris said, you mentioned that not many people are having issues. I know Charlie Kimball brushed the wall a little bit. I know today Dixon actually struggled with handling. I know Connor Daly bailed on a qualifying sim because it just didn't feel right. We saw him wash up a little bit. I think Graham was also having one of those issues as well as Ferrucci. Ferrucci, I think he actually said, let's go put it back to our normal setup. And then, I think a few cars were a little squirrely. I think it was just because of all the heat. But I was kind of surprised that Colton Herta was very confident in today's heat. So I think we'll see Colton Herta up there tomorrow with the qualifying times. And I think really Andretti is going to dominate that all tomorrow. So sorry for Fernando not being able to land an Andretti ride this year.
Here's what I will say about McLaren and specifically Alonso with that crash is that he was running top 10 pace on the first 2 practice days, and then today he's down in 25th, and his non-tow ranking is even worse, down in 31st. So I think it was Kyle who mentioned that they rebounded, or actually might have been Joe who mentioned they rebounded quite well, but I don't know, I'm a little bit concerned about that. Maybe they're not as invested into qualifying setups as we had thought that they would be, but I mean, maybe they're focusing all their effort on race pace. But for me to see him go from pretty much in the top 10 with a comfortable car to being down in 25th and 31st with that non-tow is a little bit concerning for me. I guess we'll have to see how he does in tomorrow morning's practice session and the qualifying sessions in general. And if they are focusing on just overall race pace, just the practice sessions next week to see if they're able to fully rebound to the position that they were in on the first 2 practice days.
Yeah, the learning curve of having a new car out on track is exponential. As you go along, it gets easier and you fine tune closer, and the differences that you can make in setups start having smaller effects on the car. So it was a major setback to crash. Certainly, I guess I should say I was impressed because of the ability of the team to get that car back out on track and to start turning laps again. But yeah, you are right. It is concerning to see them so far down the order, and we would expect that from somebody who had a crash, any sort of crash, sparing a minor incident like Kimball brushing the wall type of stuff, that they would definitely be sent back down the order, and they're going to have to start from square one, and they'll be behind for a little while. So hopefully they can catch up quickly. But yeah, you're right. It is concerning to see them so far down.
I even think yesterday he was very animate about the way his car was handling even before the crash. I think he was very upset with how the car was handling. So I think it kind of foreshadowed the eventual, wash up and hit the wall. I do think he's better set than last year. I think last year they did really struggle about what they wanted to do. And so I do think McLaren has a little bit of a head down on what they need to do to kind of like Joe said, rebound for tomorrow and in the race. So it's going to be quite interesting.
Alexander Stegall brought up a good point, saying, why didn't Alonso choose to run IndyCar full time? He figured that was one thing that McLaren wanted when joining IndyCar as a team. And that's actually something interesting that we had pulled out as well. I feel like, I don't want to get too far off topic here, but I feel like Alonso didn't want to leave F1 on a poor note, and he wasn't really in that competitive of a ride with McLaren. Now, I don't know how Renault is going to be with the next set of Formula One regulations. As a whole thing for another episode. But I'd assume that's why he isn't joining IndyCar full-time. I don't know if it's in his best interest. I think Alonso right now, it's pretty obvious that he is committed to the Indianapolis 500 because it's that final leg of the Triple Crown that he needs to secure it. I don't know. I haven't seen him as a driver that's entirely interested in running IndyCar full-time ever. I don't think I've ever seen him even hint at it.
He's not interested.
Yeah. But the interesting thing
he tested the road course car at Barber. He's had offers. He has had opportunity. If he wanted to, he'd do it.
Right. But I think the interesting thing that comes out of everything we've heard this week is that Renault has ruled out Fernando running in the next 2 seasons because that's when he's going to be in Formula One. Now, some people are like, oh, well, Monaco's a week early next year. That's qualifying weekend for Indy. Now, by regulation, he could have somebody else qualify that car and run Monaco and Indy on the same year. But it looks like Renault is the first person to shut that down, saying that they're not going to let him run, even if there isn't a clash with Formula One, because they don't want him having Indianapolis as a distraction to the overall Formula One championship. So the commentators this week have been bringing up, will we see Alonso at Indianapolis again? Do you think that this is going to be his last chance at a victory at Indianapolis? He's 39 years old. I mean, he's sort of running out of time. What do you think about that, Kyle?
If he doesn't win it this year, I think he's been... I mean, obviously, he's got the 2 legs of it done. He seems very, like you said, very committed and, checking off that box of the Indy 500. And I think it's going to be down to how he does this year in the race and what the IndyCar's regulations look like when he's able to come back in 2023, because we don't even know that yet. I think it's obvious Renault is like Cyril, that guy at Renault, flat out said that even this year he's holding his breath until Fernando gets out of the car after the race of the 500. So they don't want their driver getting hurt. They don't want their driver to be distracted. Zach Brown said that he'd be cool with Fernando coming and running for McLaren, even though he drives for Renault. And then Fernando himself said it probably wouldn't be a good idea. So we're gonna have 2 off years of Fernando, and just it's gonna be down to those 2 things. If he wins this year, then he won't come back. But I don't know. It's just down to those 2 key factors.
I mean, that going back to the question I brought up earlier is, do we think that this is going to be his last shot? I don't know myself. I think he's still going to have that competitive spirit in him to come back when he does have a shot at it, but he doesn't have all the time in the world like some of these younger guys do. So I think he's really going to have to take some serious looks into, not that he's not doing it this year, but I think he's going to have to take any opportunity possible to boost his chances at winning the race. I mean, you have to be looking, I think, at a very strong team like Andretti or Penske or Ganassi if you're going to want to have a shot at it. I'm not sure. I mean, McLaren has been there this week in pace during the race or during race practice sessions. But I just don't think right now that he would have a shot not being one of those top teams. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad take because the Indy 500 is really up in the air.
Here's another thing I thought of is you also have to remember with the new Formula One regulations, we have no idea what the pace of Renault is going to be. So it could also come down to, we don't know. Maybe Fernando comes out of the box in 2022 and wins a championship or wins races, and then why would he want to leave F1? Maybe he keeps going with Renault, and as long as he's with Renault, he's not coming to the 500. So that's another factor. So there's no way to say whether this is his last shot or not. I mean, I for one, just flat out right now, hope that it's not his last shot. I love seeing Fernando trying to come and do this. I think it's something very fascinating to watch.
Right. Well, I think that right there is why Alonso is joining Renault at Formula One, because he's putting a lot of faith in them. I'm sure Renault is thinking something or they have some information that the rest of us don't know regarding the next set of regulations and their confidence going into it, that they might have relayed to Alonso as hopes to persuade him. I'm not sure right now. I'm sure that that's what Alonso is going for, is that he wants to be in a competitive Formula One ride again. He wants to get a couple more wins. But yeah, it will be disappointing to not see him here for the next couple of years. I mean, it's pretty much he's been overall very welcomed at Indianapolis, and it's a shame that with this being his last race at Indianapolis, at least for now, that he's not going to be able to celebrate it with the fans, which is actually that's quite a big thing that I didn't bring up this episode, is that the reason we're doing the Rain Race podcast right now is because Kyle and I and Joe, well, not Joe quite yet, but Jaron, we were supposed to be in Indianapolis right now, and I was going to be doing some live episodes from the Airbnb that we were going to be staying in, but you make with what you can in 2020. Anyway, I guess we're going to dive into the last part of the episode here, because we're going to have plenty more to talk about over the weekend after qualifying is over. Just quick round table, we haven't done them in a while. Some predictions for qualifying, and I'm not just saying who you think is going to win who's going to win the pole. If you think anybody is going to be not so competitive, if you think somebody is going to bin the car, if you want to just put $20 on that wild prediction right now, feel free. I guess I'll start. I think this is going to be the year that we see an Andretti car on pole. And myself being biased, I'd love to see it be Marco Andretti, but I don't think he's going to have the shot with his order in the qualifying draw. I'll actually go back to that real quick because that does make a big deal here. I'd like to say an Andretti car is going to win the pole. I think Alexander Rossi is a great shot at it. I think other drivers like Scott Dixon would be a great prediction as well. So I guess if I had to pick two right there, it would be Dixon or Alexander Rossi. Two Hondas that have shown pace all week that are both relatively order in the qualifying draw. And I don't think we're going to see that much from Dragon Speed. They've been showing all week that they're concentrating pretty much solely on race pace. They were the last car by a huge margin during today's practice session. So I don't expect that we're going to see anything wild from them. I'd expect them to round off the field. But we'll see what they have in store for the race.
My pick, I think, going out in sixth, I think Scott Dixon is going to be our pole sitter. I'd love to say it'd be an Andretti. They've shown all the speed, but so is Scott Dixon. One thing that really shows me that they have speed is how it was later in the day and almost end of the session when the track was pretty hot, and Dixon was still able to jump up to third. I mean, that really gives me some confidence that even if he has to go for a late second run or qualifying on Sunday being a little bit later-ish, him, for the Fast 9 shootout, that just gives me confidence that Dixon will be able to do it. Runs that will kind of interest me tomorrow. Like I said earlier, Dalton Kellett going out third. He gets an early day run, and if the track really is that different, he might qualify faster than he, would have, even though he hasn't shown a lot of pace. If he gets a run early in the day when the track's really fast, he might actually be able to qualify ahead of some other guys he wouldn't have if he wasn't so early. Other than that, I mean, Marco Andretti later in the day is going to be interesting. And then this how the Penske's do. Oh, and Ed Carpenter Racing. Ed really was low in the charts today. Connor Daly was second, but like you said, in the no-toes, he was pretty far back. So I think, and they're always in the Fast 9. They're always really good. VK has the highest draw for them in fourth. So, I think Ed Carpenter Racing, they're definitely going to be ones to see how they do. It's really going to be interesting.
Yeah, if I'm looking at the qualifying draw and thinking about who I'm watching, I'm very focused on the first 6 cars, and even with Dixon, it's kind of starting to come to the edge of, are you going to be running in the direct sunlight in the beginnings of the hot part of the day? I'm really excited to see what Harvey can do. Jack. somehow. Maybe in the ending of the day it'll start cooling off a little bit by the time they get out, and maybe they'll have competitive temperatures to be competing in for top spots. It'll be interesting to see what happens at the very end of the day as well, and I'd certainly be excited to see what sort of shakeups would come out of that.
Joe, I'm very sorry, but I muted your audio instead of mine for a small part of that. I really need to get better at this, because usually what I do is when I do a live stream, I'll throw on the blank card, which is this one, as you all know, and I'll leave it there, and that's what it is, and I don't touch anything else the entire podcast. But for this one, I've been sort of playing around the whole time, and I've made a couple of mistakes, so I'm sorry about that. Okay. I'll learn about
Garbage.
But
then,
Joe, just quick recap on what you would predict.
Quick recap. Watch the top 6, the first 6 cars to come out. I think the first 6 cars to come out are going to be in an optimal area of with temperatures. Jack Harvey might be a good dark horse to watch out for. I'm excited for Rinus VeeKay, because I think Rinus has kind of shown he could pull something off. Maybe he could do well. He has been one of the more he's been the more impressive of the rookies, at least as far as I've seen. And then watch the final few cars to see if the temperatures cool down maybe by the time they get back out, if they can shake up the order. And then when the day's ending, last car out on track, I think that'll be interesting to see who the last car out on track, who gets out there to try to set a faster time. Will they be able to do that? Will they be able to go faster?
How do you guys feel about the rookies this year? Because I've noticed, because I brought it up a couple days ago, I think they've come up the charts a little bit, but on day one I noticed out of the bat that Askew and Pato were pretty far down the board, while Fernando was like 5th. I think Pelot has done really well. I think who else? You have VeeKay. VeeKay's done really well. Even though he didn't at Texas, he's really shown, like Joe said, what he can do. Just what do you guys think of the Kellett? Has been slow, but
I think the strongest one I've noticed from the rookies is VeeKay. If we saw that first rookie and refreshers test, it looked like VeeKay was really strong out of the box, and Pelot. So I'm definitely looking out for those two. But I don't think for tomorrow, for my qualifying pick, I think it's going to be Ryan Hunter-Reay. He had the fastest no-toe time today, and it was kind of in the heat. I don't mean to be biased. The second person I would choose is Dixon. Obviously, my whole dad working for the team and all that. But I'm kind of stuck on between Dixon and Hinchcliffe. I think Hinchcliffe had a really good car all week as well. And I'd honestly say as well as Daly. So it's kind of like I'm kind of stuck on between who could be pulled, because there's really a lot of great cars that were in the top 10 and top 5 all week through practice and refreshers. So I definitely think VeeKay could honestly get a top 5 tomorrow in qualifying. I don't know about Pelot. Pelot, I would say probably 9th on the board. But for the other rookies, Pato, I don't know. I'd say probably 15th. And Askew probably at least 6th place. So that's just my 2 cents.
But you're saying you think we're going to have 3 rookies in the Fast 9?
Yeah, I think they're really strong. A lot of them were stronger this week. It's just I think a lot of teams are hiding their cards. I don't see really Castroneves making the top 10 at all, because he kind of struggled with this car all day today, and throughout the week a little bit as well. I don't know. I mean, I guess I think too Penske's been kind of hiding their cards, which is smart. I mean, all week we've seen Andretti just hammering it and she going letting loose. So I don't know if that was the smartest move on their part, but tomorrow we'll see that for sure.
Here's a bold prediction. Do you think we're going to see any Penske's in the top 9? Because looking at the non-toe speeds from today and just looking at the overall order and where some of the Penske's are going to be in the qualifying draw, I'd be a little skeptical, honestly. I mean, they're usually a staple, even top 3 team in qualifying over the past few years. And if we leave tomorrow, and even if only one of them is in the Fast 9, I wouldn't be that surprised. I said it earlier in the episode, but Will Power had mentioned that over just a single lap, they can't seem to match the pace of some of these Honda teams, at least in qualifying trim. So I think that that's something very interesting. It's a complete 180 from what we've seen over the past couple of years, but something to keep in mind for sure. I know Hinchcliffe's name has been thrown around a little bit. Triple Crown Racing had mentioned his name. I mean, he's going in the heat of the day right there, 20th place. So if he's going to get pole, it's going to be really tough, I think. The conditions are sort of against him. But, Kyle had brought up the rookies at Indianapolis, and I just think that overall, this is not the best season to be a rookie at Indianapolis. You got these track conditions that are abnormal. A lot of the teams are sort of experimenting with setups that they aren't fully confident in because they're usually running with cooler temperatures. So the teams are learning alongside the drivers. They've had less practice time because they lost Tuesday, and I believe the overall sessions themselves have been shorter as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, definitely interesting for the rookies. They've had a lot of pressure on their shoulders. But I do think that we could see a couple of them like Alex Palou. He was 15th in the no-toe times today. I don't know. Maybe we could see some drivers like him pull off a surprise, but I wouldn't expect anything too crazy with the rookies during this qualifying session.
No faith in Oliver Askew, me boy?
Well, I think for them it just comes down to what they're running. I mean, the McLarens haven't impressed me too much with qualifying pace. You look at overall, they were 18th and 19th today, and no-toe, Pato O'Ward was 13th, Oliver Askew was 22nd, so I think it would be a real shoo-in if one of them makes it to the top 9. I'd certainly be surprised, but I've been proven wrong in the past.
You do have to consider with Askew, I mean, we know Askew is a really great driver, but he is going out in the middle. At 17th out in the draw, he is definitely going out in the part of the day where it's going to be hot. So it would be an uphill battle for Askew to be performing really well. Not to say that I doubt Oliver Askew. I've always, since 2017 was when I first caught wind of Oliver Askew, and I have fully believed the whole time he's a very strong, good race car driver. But he definitely has an uphill battle if he wants to be competing at the front end of the field in qualifying.
We have Indy Pro 2000 driver from last year, Jacob Abel, in the chat saying Dalton Kellett dark horse pole. Well, that's a bold one right there. I'll give you $10 if you're right on that one, but for sure an interesting call.
I think you should give him more than $10 for that one.
You know what? Maybe I'll just give him 20. Who knows? But hey, maybe we can get a driver in here on the post-qualifying show. See if Braden or Jacob are up to anything. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much everything that I've had to discuss here. I'm going to leave it open at the very end just if anybody has any questions that they've been wanting to get our answers on. But overall, like I said at the beginning of the show, practice has been pretty drama-free with the exception of Alonso. I haven't seen anything out of the ordinary. In fact, no, I have seen things out of the ordinary. Is not too many torn up race cars because that's pretty much what I've become used to at Indianapolis during the practice week. It is hotter than usual on average, so the teams are getting used to that. And if anybody's seeming to make best of it, it seems to be the Honda teams, and particularly Andretti Autosport. Somebody had mentioned Ryan Hunter-Reay. It was actually Slothy Racing. Cole Freilich, hello, brought up Ryan Hunter-Reay for pole, and he was the fastest car without a toe in Fast Friday today at a 2:32.124. So
and on Wednesday too,
right? So that'll be very interesting. I mean, he is running. I mean, you look at this qualifying draw chart, he is running pretty much when you don't want to. I think if he was at the beginning, if he was in the top 8 or 9, I think he would be an easy pick for pole. But sitting down in 14th, I don't know. It's not going to be the worst track conditions, but it's certainly not going to be helping him.
Now, could the thing be, would you want to have your car set up? Because I know a lot today. Would you want to have your car set up for hotter weather, like that's projected for tomorrow? Because I know that's what Dixon and Hunter-Reay did, is they ran later in kind of the heat, and that's when they got, because Dixon, before he set his no-toe time, had a slightly similar no-toe speed, but he was kind of in the 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock heat today. And then as we got later into the session, near the 5 o'clock mark, he set that faster time, and I believe that's what happened with Ryan Hunter-Reay as well.
Right. I mean, I don't think it's a complete shutout for any of these drivers. If you are stuck at the end, like Marco Andretti, who's been quick all week, I don't think it's a complete shutout that he's not going to be able to make it into the Fast 9. It's just going to be against him, whereas he could probably find himself on pole. If he had gone earlier, he might be down in 7th, 8th, or even 9th place. I don't think it's, a complete end of the day for some of those guys, but, I mean, it's the luck of the draw. It's Indy qualifying, so that's something that the drivers have to deal with, I guess. But anyway, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Like I said, we will be back either Sunday or Monday nights to recap qualifying, and we're probably going to have a post-race one as well. So a couple more Rain Race Podcast live streams to look forward to, and hopefully I've gotten all of my personal issues out of the way here where I cannot properly run an OBS stream without screwing up. And the next ones will run a little bit more flawlessly. Hey, we're going to cut it out in post. And speaking of post, I am going to cut it out in post. You can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anything. TuneIn Radio, probably. No, not TuneIn. iHeartRadio. Whatever.
What?
Go check it out. If you want to listen to us. We are primarily focused on YouTube because, like you've seen here, we can be more interactive and you can actually see the visual side of things that we're talking about. But if you're on the run or you're in the car or whatever, you want to save some data, that is an option. And you can find the link to all those on our Twitter, which is at Rain Race Podcast. So for myself, Kyle, Joe Donahue, Jaron Fast, hope to see you in the next one. Take care.